On a sunny August afternoon in 1966, two Brazilian electronic technicians set out on what would become the final journey of their lives. Their destination, Morro do Vintém, a densely vegetated hill overlooking the bustling coastal city of Niterói, just across the bay from Rio de Janeiro. The men, Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel José Viana, were not there for sightseeing. They carried no provisions, save for an empty water bottle, a couple of towels, and a small notebook filled with cryptic instructions. Clad in formal suits and waterproof coats, they ascended the hill in silence. Strangely, each man carried a peculiar item, a lead mask, opaque and crudely cut, resembling the kind used to protect against radiation. What happened next would confound authorities for decades, spawning a range of theories that span the mundane to the otherworldly. To this day, the case remains one of Brazil's most enduring unsolved mysteries, a story of bizarre deaths, coded messages, and an eerie absence of answers. This is the Lead Masks Mystery, the unsolved case that still haunts Brazil. The discovery of Cruz and Viana's bodies occurred 2 days later, on August 20th, 1966. A young boy, out flying a kite along Morro do Vintém, noticed a strange sight. Two figures lying side by side in the brush, their bodies motionless. Upon closer inspection, he realized they were dead. Authorities were summoned to the scene, and what they found left them baffled. Both men were lying flat on their backs, partially covered in grass, their bodies in a state of decomposition accelerated by the heat of the Brazilian summer. There were no visible signs of struggle, no evidence of trauma or violence. Their faces were covered with the lead masks, which had been placed carefully over their eyes. Beside them, investigators found a series of odd objects: an empty water bottle, two wet towels, and a small notebook containing a cryptic message scrawled in Portuguese. It read, 1630, be at the agreed place. 1830, swallow capsules. After effect, protect metals, await signal mask. For seasoned investigators, this discovery was nothing short of perplexing. There were no obvious explanations for their deaths, no witnesses to recount what had transpired. The instructions in the notebook offered little clarity, instead raising further questions. What were the capsules? What signal were they waiting for? And why had they worn those strange lead masks? In the days leading up to their mysterious deaths, Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel José Viana were seen by friends and family as calm and collected, living their lives as they usually did in the quiet town of Campos dos Goytacazes. Known for their expertise in electronics, the two men were widely regarded as practical and level-headed, with a deep curiosity for technological innovation and the science of the day. However, beneath this surface of normalcy lay an unusual interest, an involvement in a local group fascinated by spiritualism and metaphysical phenomena. This interest, seemingly benign, would soon become a focal point in the speculation surrounding their deaths. On August 17, 1966, Cruz and Viana set out on what they told their families was a work-related trip to Sao Paulo. They withdrew a substantial amount of money, enough to purchase a used car, indicating that whatever they were planning, it was serious. Instead of heading to Sao Paulo, however, the two men took a bus to Niterói, a coastal city across the bay from Rio de Janeiro. They arrived around 2:30 p.m. and began what would be their final journey. The evidence collected by police in the aftermath of their deaths paints a picture of two men engaged in a series of seemingly ordinary activities with an undercurrent of urgency. Upon arriving in Niterói, they purchased waterproof coats, likely in anticipation of the rain that would soon begin to fall, and a bottle of water from a local bar. The waitress who served them would later describe Viana as appearing very nervous, frequently checking his watch as if he were anxiously counting down the minutes. This interaction would be the last time anyone saw the two men alive. From the bar, it's presumed that Cruz and Viana made their way directly to Morro do Vintém, a site where their bodies would be discovered 2 days later. They were reportedly seen hitching a ride up the hill with two unidentified men in a jeep, though this detail remains unconfirmed. As the rain began to fall and darkness crept in, the men pressed on, following a path that, for reasons still unknown, led them to that isolated hillside. The small details recovered from the scene, the receipts for the raincoats and the water bottle, hint at the meticulous planning that had gone into their excursion. Yet despite the significant amount of money they had withdrawn before their trip, only a small sum was found on their bodies, with the rest of the funds unaccounted for. What were they preparing for? What compelled them to climb that hill under the cover of rain, with only the essentials in hand? The presence of the lead masks, combined with their apparent agitation and concern about the time, suggests they were expecting something specific, something that required precise timing and perhaps protection from unseen forces. As the investigation deepened, the possibility that Cruz and Viana were engaged in a secret ritual or experiment became a prominent theory. The mid-1960s in Brazil was a period rife with interest in the occult, spiritualism, and UFO phenomena, and the pair's involvement in these fringe activities began to take on new significance. Could it be that they were preparing for a close encounter of some kind, or perhaps an esoteric ritual designed to elevate their consciousness or protect them from harm? When the bodies of Cruz and Viana were finally autopsied weeks after their discovery, the delay had severely compromised the investigation. The coroner's office, overwhelmed at the time, conducted the autopsies on bodies so badly decomposed that no obvious injuries could be identified. This state of decomposition rendered the internal organs too deteriorated for reliable testing, and crucially, any potential toxicology analysis was impossible. As a result, the opportunity to determine whether toxic substances played a role in their deaths was lost, leaving a significant gap in the case that remains unsolved. As the news of the lead masks case spread, it quickly captured the public's imagination, igniting a firestorm of speculation and debate. The bizarre circumstances of the deaths, 2 men found with cryptic notes, crude lead masks, and no clear cause of death, provided fertile ground for a host of theories, each more outlandish than the last. One of the most enduring and widely discussed theories was that Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana were attempting to make contact with extraterrestrial beings. The note found with the men, which referenced swallowing capsules and awaiting a signal, was seen by some as evidence that the pair were preparing for a close encounter of the third kind. The lead masks, it was suggested, were designed to protect their eyes from harmful radiation emitted by a UFO. This theory gained considerable traction after several residents of Niterói reported seeing a round orange UFO hovering over Morro do Vintém on the night the men were believed to have died. Though no concrete evidence ever emerged to substantiate these claims, the idea of a UFO connection captivated the public and fueled endless speculation. However, not everyone was convinced of the extraterrestrial explanation. Charles Bowen, writing for Flying Saucer Review in March 1967, noted that while the UFO sightings were intriguing, they lacked any solid evidence. Bowen pointed out that UFO sightings were often reported in the wake of unusual events, and without any photographs or corroborative proof, it was difficult to connect the reported UFO with the deaths of Cruz and Viana. Moreover, as Bowen astutely observed, UFOs had never been known to kill people, which cast further doubt on this theory. Instead, he suggested that the notes about swallowing capsules hinted at a more plausible cause of death, perhaps a drug overdose, which could explain the lack of any visible signs of trauma on the bodies. Yet the UFO theory wasn't the only one circulating. Another popular explanation centered on the idea that Cruz and Viana were involved in a secret scientific experiment. The crude lead masks and the cryptic instructions hinted at the possibility of a radiation experiment, one that required the men to protect their eyes from harmful rays. This theory gained some support after it was revealed that a similar incident had occurred 4 years earlier, when another electronics technician was found dead on a different hill, also wearing a lead mask. Unfortunately, details about that case were scarce, and without further evidence, the idea of a series of clandestine experiments remained speculative. Adding to the intrigue was a report that emerged 2 months before the deaths of Cruz and Viana. According to O Cruzeiro, a weekly tabloid magazine in Rio de Janeiro, the two men, along with their friend Elcio Gomes, had built some kind of device in Cruz's garden, which subsequently exploded. The incident, while alarming, was brushed off at the time, but in the context of the lead masks case, it took on new significance. Gomes, when questioned by police, revealed that the three men were part of a local group who called themselves scientific spiritualists. They were reportedly interested in trying to contact Mars, and the explosion was the result of an experiment gone wrong. This revelation suggested that Cruz and Viana's deaths might have been the tragic culmination of their increasingly risky spiritualist pursuits. Further complicating the narrative was the discovery of a book in Miguel's home workshop, where police found the tools and scrap used to cut the lead masks. The book contained passages related to intense luminosity connected to spiritual experiences, with several of these passages highlighted. This detail led some to speculate that the men were expecting to encounter a form of intense light, perhaps a spiritual or extraterrestrial event, and had fashioned the lead masks as a means of protecting their eyes. 2 weeks after the deaths, Folha de São Paulo published a statement by a self-described professor of yoga who claimed that the local spiritualist community frequently used psychedelic drugs as part of their rituals. The professor suggested that Cruz and Viana might have died from an accidental overdose during one such ritual. While the professor's account was purely anecdotal, it offered a version of the events that seemed to fit the limited information available. The ingestion of capsules, combined with the men's involvement in spiritualist activities, lent some credence to the idea that they had succumbed to the effects of hallucinogens or other substances. Despite the myriad theories, each as intriguing as the next, none could definitively explain the mystery of the lead masks. The case remains a tangle of strange occurrences and unanswered questions. Whether the men were victims of a botched experiment, participants in a failed ritual, or something far stranger, their story continues to captivate, inviting speculation and fueling the imagination of those who seek to unravel its secrets. Nearly 60 years after Cruz and Viana met their mysterious end, the lead masks case remains baffling. For those who believe in the paranormal, it stands as one of the most compelling examples of possible extraterrestrial contact. For others, it's a cautionary tale of the dangers of dabbling in the unknown, whether that be scientific experimentation, spiritual rituals, or something far stranger. Today, Morro do Vintém is no longer the isolated hill it once was, but the story of what happened there continues to haunt the minds of those who seek to understand the unexplained. The lead masks case remains unsolved, a mystery not only of death, but of the human need to seek meaning, even when it may forever elude us.